Welcome back. New this morning, a farm worker in Michigan tested positive for bird flu, making it the second known case in the U.S., according to public health officials. And apparently that worker fell ill after being exposed to infected livestock. Now, thankfully, they only had mild symptoms and made a full recovery. But we do want to bring in Dr. Winawer, who is going to talk with us now about these implications here. So what does this mean for us?
Well, an important thing to remember, just like you said, this was from livestock to the farm workers who were in close contact with poultry or a cow in this case. The important thing is both of these patients, there was a person in Texas and now in Michigan, and they actually had eye symptoms. They didn't have cough, they didn't have sneezing, they didn't have shortness of breath. And when they swabbed the nose of this gentleman in Michigan, actually the nasal swab was negative. The eye swab was positive. So what that tells us is that transmission from human to human, at least right now, via respiratory secretions is not there. And we haven't had a case of human to human transmission. So that is reassuring, particularly since it doesn't seem to be a respiratory pathogen, or at least it's not infectious in that regard.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because it seems like every case that we've known of, so far only 2, has been through a farm worker, right?
Right.
So for the average person who doesn't work with animals, what should they keep in mind?
That's a really good question. The risk is low. We've seen last week the first case in beef, which is a concern. At least it gets your attention. But the average person shouldn't worry as long as you cook your food. Do not eat raw or even rare meat. Your meat should be cooked to an internal temperature of close to 160 degrees. That's for salmonella and E. coli prevention too. But a big thing here to keep in mind too is that we don't know how many of the cattle have an infection but are asymptomatic, which is really important, because in this case the cattle was sick and did not make it into the food supply, and the USDA is not saying that we should indiscriminately test all cattle. So we don't really know. It's infected 58 herds throughout the US right now, this virus, but we really don't know. So the best thing I could say to people is that just cook your meat. Make sure that it's cooked thoroughly.
Well, that's something new to keep in mind, because I remember the last time you were on, we were talking about dairy cows. So it sounds like this is just constantly evolving. There's always something to be aware of. Can you speak more to the recent study about unpasteurized milk and all of that jazz? How does that affect us here?
Yeah, well, there was a study done last week that looked at unpasteurized milk given to mice, and the mice were immediately infected within 24 hours and had symptoms. And then there was also cats, 24 cats on a Texas farm actually ingested raw milk. 12 of them died. So that's very concerning that this could pose a threat to mammals. So what do you do in this situation? Well, don't consume raw milk. This has implications really worldwide, because people outside the U.S., some people don't have pasteurization process. And one thing to keep in mind too, that another study which they did was they refrigerated raw milk for like 30 days, and it did not kill the virus in a large sense. So just refrigerating raw milk is not going to protect you potentially from a virus. So if you consume pasteurized milk, there should not be a threat or concern for the average consumer. Just don't consume raw milk.
Now, I remember there was a time that it was an anomaly to even hear of this in cows. I know you said the risk is low, but do you have any other final thoughts on what we should know at this hour? Yeah,
I mean, this could be scary in the sense that viruses tend to mutate, but we've known avian flu for 20 years. We've had it since '96, so this is much, much different than coronavirus. And for the average person, if you just keep in mind this, only consume milk that's pasteurized, and if you have beef, just make sure that it's cooked to an internal temperature, at least 145, but it should be close to 160, medium well. then you shouldn't, the worry for you is minimal. You shouldn't even think about it. Go about your daily lives. But this is something we're definitely keeping our eye on because viruses change, they mutate, and we just want to make sure that there's no risk for widespread cases.
And of course, here in Georgia, we do have some people in rural areas, some farm workers, and they, of course, are keeping a close eye on this.
100%, 100%. That's very important to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you so much, as always, Dr. Winawer. We appreciate your time.